Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. It is 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to ask everyone to please stand, remove your hats if you have any, and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, let me get this maybe over here. There we go. Okay. Do we have any changes on our agenda?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, I would note for the record that all members are present, minus Mayor Kreitz, and then I would also request that item H be moved to the beginning of the action agenda as requested by you as the chair.
Okay. Thank you. Do we need to vote on that? No. Okay. Okay. I should have had you take roll. I apologize.
I noted it for the record, so I think we're covered.
Okay. Okay, next is our public comment. The portion of the agenda is provided to allow members of the audience to provide comments to the town board. Please sign in and the mayor will call you. If your comments or concerns require an action, that item or items will need to be placed on a later agenda. Please limit the time of your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone? Okey doke. Thank you. Moving on to our staff reports. Mr. Osler, you're up.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem March and members of the board. Just a couple of things I want to update. One is we do, as a reminder and an announcement to the public, we are doing our business roundtable tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. at the Halleck Willard building. So again, it's a wonderful opportunity to engage businesses and to get feedback from the businesses. This has been part of our tour for the last year and a half. The second thing is I asked Ryan, who sits on our Colorado Municipal League policy committee, just to get an update of what's going on at the State House with the legislature. As you're aware, and you probably have seen some of the emails that have come out, we do have a bill that has come out, a Senate Bill 23-213, that has some significant impacts regarding housing and local control with municipalities. So I wanted him to just give you a quick high-level 3-minute update on that, and we can certainly have some more discussions at some upcoming study sessions regarding that.
Okay. Go, Mr. Ryan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and take just a couple minutes of your time. A couple minutes is certainly not sufficient enough to go into any level of detail on what's going on. At this point, we're a little over halfway through the legislative session, and over 550 bills have been submitted for review. Only 64 have actually been signed by the governor to date. So a bunch of these are currently held over or not currently scheduled for hearing or anything like that. As the town manager mentioned, I do sit on the Public Policy Committee for representing the town of Frederick, as well as their municipal caucus, which meets every 2 weeks during legislative session, where we track bills and go through things that are potential issues. The one that I wanted to just focus on and call your attention to this evening is Senate Bill 23-213, which is kind of the common term is the land use bill. I think information may have been provided to you previously. If not, we can get that information to you. It is a quick 105-page read. And this bill was introduced last week with a lot of fanfare downtown, and is been identified as a priority for the current administration and the governor's office. That there's primary concerns associated with this land use bill is because it's really a fundamental and philosophical shift in how land use is currently constructed, where a lot of that is delegated down to municipalities, local control, to make their own land use decisions as the community sees fit. This potential bill actually has several things in it that a lot of communities, a lot of municipalities have flagged as concerns. And these are things that we would just want to bring to your attention. There's a section in there that actually changes the structure of the Department of Local Affairs from being like a consultant role. And I've worked with them for, I don't know, well over a decade on different types of consulting things, to a regulatory arm where they would be created to sort of be an oversight to make sure that municipalities in Colorado are complying with the state's land use and pretty much housing standards. That's what this is really aimed at driving. Municipalities are segregated based on their proximity to major corridors, rail, urban centers, into one of four categories. Tier 1 urban communities or urban municipalities is kind of your first inner ring of cities in the Denver metro area. Tier 2, we are actually would be considered a Tier 2 urban municipality in this bill. And so there's a whole set of structures and potential compliance things that we would have to do from a land use compatibility standpoint as a Tier 2 municipality. For example, Tier 2 municipalities, they're communities that have between 5 and 25,000 people in population. So that's why we kind of fit in there, plus of our proximity to Denver Metro and being along I-25 corridor as a major corridor. There are several preemptions that are drafted in the bill as well, and I'm not going to go into depth on any of these, but for example, there's zoning preemption number 1 regarding accessory dwelling units would make it so that way a municipality can't actually prohibit accessory dwelling units. You have to allow them, and they have to be of a certain size, and it has to match the state's standards for what accessory dwelling units may be or where they may be allowed. Municipalities would have to change their local laws to meet the bill's minimum standards, and this compliance would have to occur by June of next year. And that's one preemption. Zoning preemption number 2 relates to what they call middle housing and providing greater affordability and accessibility to housing types that are meant to really get to that missing middle income earners, which I think we largely agree, is lacking from a lot of communities. But this is sort of a prescriptive methodology that's outlined here, again, that we would have to comply with and meet the state's definitions that are proposed in the bill. Zoning preemption number 3 is regarding housing and transit-oriented areas, and the goal there is to drive density in any of these areas that could potentially be transit-oriented. And the way they're defining that is if you are a community that has fixed rail in your community, you are required to have a plan that meets those density requirements, including multifamily, single family attached, and mobile homes in there. And so, again, the goal is to drive density to these pockets and to these areas. Zoning preemption number 4 is to require housing in key corridors. So a municipality couldn't be less restrictive by allowing lower density. You'd have to allow for higher density development along key corridors, things like I-25, I-225, I-270 through the metro area. So that way you're getting these hubs of density near where there's likely to be public transit. That's housing or zoning preemption number 4. I won't go into the things that apply to rural and resort communities. That's a different set of standards. Some of the ones I mentioned apply, but there's other things that apply to those communities as well. And then there's a whole framework for how we comply with that. The timing is precarious because we happen to be redoing our comprehensive plan and our zoning code. So on one hand, this is good to know about this now, because if we have to, it would be unfortunate if we approve a new land use code and approve a new comprehensive plan, and then this or some variation of this gets approved, and then we're automatically out of compliance, and because of that, we now have to meet a state model code. So the timing of this is going to be really, really key over the course of the balance of this legislative session. There's provisions in there regarding unreasonable costs or delays, regarding zoning preemptions that preempts any local land use law that individually or cumulatively creates unreasonable costs or delays for a developer and a proposed development. There's a provision in there related to interference that preempts a municipality from amending, developing, or interpreting a local law in a manner that is interfering with the state's intent of what these housing standards would be. There's a parking definition or a provision in there that would prohibit a municipality from requiring off-street parking as a part of housing development approval. That if the key corridor concept, it would appear to prohibit parking requirements for any development in the approval in a key corridor, not just housing. And then while there is a segment in there that talks about water, wastewater, and stormwater burdens, a municipality would have to go through a specified process that's sort of outlined in here, but not clearly outlined. If there's an issue where you can't provide service to a development, you could apply for an exemption through DOLA to not have to meet some of these requirements. That is a double-edged sword also, because if you start telling the world, hey, we don't have water, sewer services, stormwater services, what message does that send out to the community? So, that is problematic for communities as well. And then the definitions on manufactured housing would have to change and meet the state's standard definitions for manufactured housing. And that the goal with that is to make sure that you're eliminating any barriers for HUD financing for manufactured housing. Needless to say, a lot of communities have a lot of concern, a lot of heartburn with this potential bill. One provision that's interesting, but again, kind of fits the MO of furthering this housing idea, is that currently, as a statutory town, if we have surplus land, we would need to go to the voters to be able to sell that land. And we've talked about that in other circumstances here in Frederick. This draft bill actually removes that. If a community has surplus land and they're wanting to sell it and it's for affordable housing, then you don't have to go to the voters for that. Again, this is, the executive summary is 14 pages by itself. So I'm happy to sit down and go in more depth with this. This is not currently scheduled for hearing at this point, but we anticipate it's going to be soon. The current sponsors of the bill are Senator Dominic Moreno and Representative Woodrow and Representative Joda out of Denver, and it's currently assigned to the Local Government Housing Committee. A lot of communities are choosing to take a route of taking a formal position on this bill. Many of them are choosing to take a position of opposition. Communities can choose to do that through a variety of means. You can do it through a letter that then gets forwarded on, usually through your change to CML or to your local legislators. But CML is the traditional route. Another option is the elected body could choose to take a position officially through a resolution in support or opposition of a measure. Other items exist as options, including up to going and testifying for an opposition of a bill. I've done that many times over the years as well. And so we just wanted to bring this to your attention. I know Frederick hasn't done a ton of tracking legislative matters, but I have in a lot of other communities. And so I just don't know what the flavor is of this elected body for how involved we want to be with something like this.
And Mayor Pro Tem and Board, I would just suggest at this point, just wanted to provide, the intent was just to provide a quick update. And I think we can produce a study session that's specific to this on, I think, April 4th. We already have one scheduled. So with that, if there's any other questions about the admin report, I'm happy to entertain that.
If I could add before we move on, CML has scheduled tomorrow a 2-hour block starting at noon for member municipalities to get additional information, talking points, how to background material, how to reach your legislatures, an overview of the bill, et cetera, et cetera. So if you'd like to participate in that webinar, let me know and I can forward you this invite so that you can register for that.
It is kind of over the lunchtime hour, and I think they've got an hour and a half blocked off.
Okay. The agenda says that it would end at 1:30, so from noon to 1:30.
Well, I would I want to participate in that for sure, but, I was kind of under the impression, I saw the notification from CML that we could just go through CML and register, but I
You can.
can.
I did. That's
Would
how
it be
I.
easier and better if we went through you, so you know?
Well, all I have is a link to provide you.
Oh, okay,
So it would go directly to CML. If you've already received that email, that would be the right email
Okay.
to register for that event.
and that's at noon tomorrow, I thought I remember.
Mhm.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if any member of the board needs assistance with getting registered for that, just let me know and I can hop on and register anyone in the organization. So happy to do that for you.
Great, thank you. And we've got something scheduled for the 4th, so we've got a block set for that. Okay, all right, Ryan, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments, Ryan, on this? Ryan, thank you so much. Back to you, sir. Got anything else?
That's it.
Anybody have anything for Brian? Nothing? Okay. With that, being, okay, hold on. Go ahead, Wendy?
I don't know if we were gonna get a update from the police department in your report, or if that might be later.
Yeah, I would probably just recommend at this point the the events that happened today. Certainly, the PD handled it very well, and we can provide some additional updates to the board as needed. Or if there's any questions, please reach out to myself or the chief, and they can certainly provide any updates individually as well. So things are under control. There's a great partnership with the school district and the PD, and they all handled it very well. So we've got an excellent team and excellent partnership with our school district as well.
Anyone else have something? Nothing? Okay, Brian, thank you so much. Moving on, Megan, you're up. Has anyone got any questions for Megan or anything? No? I have a question, just a little brief one. How's our scholarship
Sure.
fund going?
So the scholarship committee met last week and provided their top candidates. 7 candidates are moving forward to the interview phase, and we'll be conducting interviews at the end of next week. From that, the committee will make a recommendation to the board. Hopefully by the meeting on the 28th, we will have the proposed recipients in front of you in time for them to make all of the awards nights and all of those things. So it's moving along very well. And the feedback from the committee is they like this early deadline. It gives them a little bit more time.
That's great.
How many applicants did we have?
We had 15, and they have moved forward with 7 as finalists.
Great, thank you.
So we chose 7 out of the 15?
Yes.
Cool, great. That's one of my most favorite things to see that. That's great. Okay, nothing else for Megan? If there is nothing, then we shall move on to the consent agenda. Any changes or anything on the consent agenda? Anyone have anything they want to bring up? If not, then I need some direction, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as is.
Second.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Trustee Taveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
There he is.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Lamach,
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem March.
Yes,
Motion passes 6-0.
thank you. All right, nothing else on consent agenda. We will move to our action agenda, and we've made a little change here so we can bring Chief Young up here so we can address Resolution 23R18.
Yes, and Mayor Pro Tem March, while Chief Young is coming up, I will just real quickly introduce, as part of the board's strategic plan, specifically the board set out to develop a safe and secure community, to foster and improve relationships with our public safety and emergency agencies, seeking ways to collaborate and leverage resources. This resolution is before the board as part of that in recommendation to move forward with collecting the impact fees that certainly any development has on a community to provide safe and secure. And we have been working very well and tremendously. There's been a lot of work put into this over many years with the fire district to get to this point. And the board actually passed a resolution in 2021 with the collection of these fees contingent upon obviously working with our neighbors to the north. And so since that time, we have worked with the fire district and we've set forth a good plan to move forward with collection of these fees beginning effectively June 1 for both residential and commercial. And with that, I'm going to also toss it over to Chief.
All right.
First and foremost, thanks for moving this up on the agenda. I'm sure my family's going to appreciate that. So I appreciate that, Mayor Pro Tem and board. Just on behalf of the board and men and women of the fire district, just want to thank you for bringing this as an action item this evening and getting this moved as we can start this impact fee collections as of June 1 of this year. I am happy to report that I'll just say the same thing. The neighbors to the north, they have also moving in the governance of documents as well. And right now we are scheduled to also do June 1st as well for the town of Firestone for impact fees. So it'd be consistent across the entire fire district in that realm. So fingers crossed, everything goes well there. But so far we do have between 2 or 3 presentations to their board and a lot of offsite meetings as well. They finally have given staff direction to get the governance documents done and the IGA done by the end of April. So happy to report that. And so the consistency in making sure that, you know, it's across the entire district and that we're not collecting impact fees only in the town of Frederick. It'll be in the town of Frederick and the town of Firestone is the entire plan as of June 1, 2023. So
That's great.
also just want to let you guys know that we're our Station 5, which is scheduled for a groundbreaking in mid to late May. The groundbreaking ceremony, we'll make sure that staff lets all of you know to be invited to that for our Station 5 in the Windham Hill area. And contractors are supposed to be on site and executing as far as middle of June. Right now they're saying a 12 to 14 month build time on that. And we got all of our final bids today from our contractor, so we're going through those as well. So everything's moving forward for Station 5 in the Windham Hill, Frederick area as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions like that, but here pretty much to say thank you. Greatly appreciate it. This has been a uphill battle for me. It's been for the last 5, almost 6 years. So I'll be glad to get this moved on and off our plate and moving forward to making just that much more of a safer community.
Chief, thank you for all of the hard work and for the great job that you give our communities. We're pretty lucky to have you and your staff and taking care of us and watching over us. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody have anything for Chief?
Thank you.
Okey doke.
Also look forward to being here in May and giving you guys our annual report. And staff will be here, and hopefully, I don't know how much time Megan's going to give us, but hopefully 15, 20, 25, 30, 45, an hour.
2 hours.
Ooh, okay, let's go back down to 30. No, however much time we have. We just want to make sure you guys are well informed on what the district's completed the last year and then also where we're headed and the vision of the organization from myself and the board of directors. So,
Superb. Sounds good. Thank you, Chief Young.
thank you.
Great. All right, moving right along. We need some direction on 23R18.
Mayor Pro Tem, I recommend approval of resolution number 23R18, a resolution of Town of Frederick, Colorado, approving an intergovernmental agreement for Frederick Firestone Fire Protection District impact fees.
I'll second.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March,
Yes.
Trustee Teveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Lamont.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Great. Thanks again, Chief. All right. We will now move on to our second item, which is a public hearing, second reading ordinance of 1381.
All right, so in terms of presentation, it's the same ordinance that was presented last month,
Yes.
and no changes have been made. The only typographical change I made was to on the ordinance designate what date we had a first reading versus a second reading, but the substance of the ordinance and the franchise agreement hasn't changed since that time. So in terms of what's next steps are, would be to open the public hearing, if there's any additional comments from the public, to receive those, and then close the public hearing, and the board can then take action at that point to finalize or not.
Okay. Well, we will open the public hearing. We have anyone? Nothing? All right. In that case, we will formally close the public hearing, and we need some direction, I do believe.
Mayor Pro Tem March, I move to approve ordinance number 1381, an ordinance approving a franchise agreement between the Town of Frederick, Colorado and Black Hills, Colorado Gas Incorporated.
Second.
Trustee Lamont,
Yes.
Trustee Teveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right. Next up here is one of my favorite things. It has to do with water. Sarah?
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Board of Trustees. Megan's going to be bringing up a short presentation.
I love this.
There you go, man. Now if I could just set my taskbar.
All right, so again, tonight we're going to be talking about Colorado Big Thompson water unit purchase. So these are the goals from 2022 and 2023. In 2022, the goal, which was a capital funded project, was to purchase at least 200 units of CBT. So we purchased 197 by the end of the year, which left a little bit of a window, and we did save some money on some of the units that we purchased. We budgeted for $70,000 per unit. Some were a little higher, some were a little lower. And then in 2023, the budget plan is to purchase 30 units of CBT. So again, that was part of the strategic plan, and it tied into our 10-year water plan for purchasing at least 200 units for economic incentives. That budget was $14 million. We do have some funds left over from that capital budget from 2022. And then for 2023, the capital budget was about $2.1 million, assuming $70,000 per unit for 30 CBT units. And so before you today is an option to purchase 40 units of CBT, and we can afford that from the cost savings that we had from the 2022 funds and the 2023 funds. And then we'll be hitting our goal for the 200 units, exceeding that goal, and also hitting our goal for 30 units in the year. Do you guys have any questions?
Questions? Comments? I make one comment. Thank you.
I have one comment. So I see that they're in a contract to use the water till the end of the year at a fee. And then they have the right to come back and do that again next year, correct?
They can
If we're
request.
not gonna use the water?
They can request to do that, but it's ultimately our water, so it just depends on if the board would allow that. We have done rent backs in the past. I think last year there was a purchase of, I think it was 30 units that was rented back to Western Equipment for the end of the irrigation season. It's a pretty common practice. At this point, we wouldn't be using that water. So if that's something that the board would entertain, it wouldn't affect our portfolio for the next year.
I would love to make sure we take advantage of those opportunities instead of just have the water sit there. So,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thanks, Jed. Okay, anybody have any other questions for Sarah? Comments? Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, great to have this. Was a huge goal when we were trying to get it done, and you got two goals that you took care of. You finished off last year and already got this year's plus a little. So, well done.
So we don't have anything to do for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah, just take a vacation.
Just take a break.
Yeah. All right.
Action.
All right. Need a little direction, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to, make a motion to accept or authorize the resolution 23R-16, authorizing the purchase of 40 units of CBT water from Rocky Mountain Conference of Seventh-day Adventists.
Second.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Lamach,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March,
Yes.
Trustee Taveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right. Next up, we have a public hearing for ordinance 1386, amending the Frederick Land Use Code. So I think we have someone in here that knows what they're doing with this stuff. Look, a couple of people, it looks like to me.
It's very limited though.
Hi, Ally.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Board of Trustees. I am thrilled to be presenting this item to you tonight. These are our proposed amendments to Articles 1, 3, and 4 of the Land Use Code. Sorry. Slow down. In the summer of 2021, the board made updating the land use code one of its strategic goals. In 2022, the town's land use attorney, Todd Messenger, completed a thorough assessment of our existing code with the update framework. Out of that update framework came 2 interim high priority updates. The first was the permitted use table, and the second was the implementation of the 2552 East Sub-Area Plan. The item in front of you this evening is the first of those interim high priority updates. The review criteria to amend the land use code is found in section 4.7.9b. One of the 4 criteria must be met in order to amend the code. Staff believes all 4 of the criteria are met with these amendments. The existing land use table contains errors and overlaps. It also doesn't account for many of our newer use types, which have emerged in the last 10 years. These proposed changes add clarity to definitions, so staff is able to provide better consistency and surety for our applicants and our residents. The Planning Commission met January 5th, 2023. The Commission voted 4-0 to approve PCR 2023-1C, which approved amendments with conditions. The conditions were, number 1, staff share with the board the discussion had at Planning Commission. Staff did provide an expanded version of our minutes as attachment A in your packet. Number 2 was the attorneys look into remedying the specific aspects highlighted by Planning Commission. Our land use attorney has redlined the code for you this evening and included the Planning Commission suggested changes. Since the Planning Commission meeting in January 5th, staff has also discovered additional retailers, both large and small, which could have possibly been included within the definition of retail sales and service. Those were small equipment, bedding and mattresses, and copiers. We've also suggested adding clarification surrounding storage of inventory outside of the building. Staff has included those proposed changes in your ordinance, in the redlined ordinance you had in your packet as well. And now I'll turn it over to Todd for discussion and question. We'll both be here for questions, but Todd.
Thanks. Members of the board, Todd Messenger, 1801 California Street, Suite 2600, Denver. Special Land Use Council of the town, and suddenly extra proud Florida Atlantic University alum, class of 1993. It's already 94. So in any case, tonight we're here very excited to present the land use table update. The land use table is the heart of the zoning code. We have here I think performed a heart extraction and then replaced it with a healthy new heart. I'm happy to walk through. I think what I did with Planning Commission was walk through sort of how the ordinance road maps out. It was a very difficult surgery. The current code is not in very good shape to have this kind of operation done to it. So we had to figure out how everything relates, and we had to make sure that we weren't shedding current policies that are important, but just put in the wrong place in the code. So we'll have to confess this evening that we're not entirely happy with the way this is organized. And if you had the good fortune to read through this, hopefully you had coffee while you were doing that. But you'll notice some things towards the end where you're like, well, why is that just sort of thrown in there? And the answer is we didn't have another container for it. But it was standing policy of the town of Frederick, and there wasn't any really good reason to shed that currently until we get through an entire code rewrite process. I assure you that during the course of a full code rewrite process, we will reorganize this code a lot so that it will be massively cleaned up from what it is now, and things will be in an intuitive location. In the meantime, we just sort of have to carry that stuff along and repackage it later. So just to explain kind of what I mean, one of the interesting comments we had tonight was the title is very long. Unfortunately, as a legal matter, we have to say what's in the ordinance, and the ordinance is pretty big. But with respect to the title, you notice that it reaches out into several different chapters. The first thing that we do is we covered the definitions. The most important thing, I think, in terms of deploying a new use table is to make sure that every land use is defined and every definable term or phrase within each land use is also defined so that people know what it is that they've got and that staff knows when they get a proposal how they can classify it. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be some measure of discretion, but right now there's a whole bunch of stuff out there in the marketplace that's not even contemplated by the code as it currently stands. So it makes it much more difficult for staff, for applicants, for Planning Commission, for this body to do their jobs. In terms of after definitions, we get into the regulations of these individual land uses. We broke the code tables up into a number of different classifications of uses, for example, residential uses, civic uses, industrial uses, into their own separate tables. Part of that is because we're working in Microsoft Word, and if any of you have ever done a table with 120 rows in it or whatever in Word, it doesn't work out very well. And part of it is because we wanted you all to have a very good, efficient reference to the standards that are associated with the tables without having to page forward a lot and then page back. Ultimately, when this gets repackaged, it might be in one table with hyperlinks to these individual standards and hyperlinks back so that you can click back and forth. But the way this is presented now, it's really much more geared towards the lower tech approach, which I think is easier when you're adopting an ordinance like this. So getting into the various tables, you'll notice that we have a new strategy. Instead of just having a permitted use and a conditional use, there's something called a limited use. And what limited use does is it refers you to standards underneath of the table that would apply to that limited use. You kind of have that now in your code, but it's not very clear how those standards apply. And one example would be there's a storage container standard that actually applies to every single use in your use table.
And whereas on January 5th, 2023, the Town of Frederick Planning Commission reviewed.
Oops. No, it's all good.
Sorry, I apologize.
No, the computer is joining the course, and I appreciate that. That sounded like my work. So, in any case, the current code has a set of standards that apply to each use. And like I said, storage containers, we're not sure why storage container regulations are affiliated with medical marijuana patient, and we're not sure that why medical marijuana patient, for example, is a land use in the first place. Those are things that we inherited and we try to sort through. But now a permitted use is just a permitted use, and then a limited use would be subject to standards that follow the table. And then there are certain standards that come after residential protection standards, for example, storage container standards, things like that, that apply across the board anytime those things come up. So there's going to be some permitted uses that are still subject to things that they were numbered before as references, but those specific standards really just apply across the board. So in any case, just to give you an example, walking through table 3.3-1, which would be on page 40 of the ordinance, you can see that, for example, single-family detached is permitted in a number of these districts. And as you go down the table, assisted living and congregate care is a limited use in some districts and a conditional use in others. And so you would go down to the assisted living and congregate care portion, which is on the following page, Romanet 6, and it would tell you in each zoning district sort of what the standards would be that would apply to that. So if you see an L, you know you need to go down and look at the regulations that follow for something. Those would also apply in the conditional use context, in addition to conditional use standards that the town may have under its conditional use process. After all the tables, we get into some of the stuff. The commercial employment district, for example, had its own set of standards that apply to everything in that district. So we brought them forward here. We cleaned them up a little bit. There are telecommunication standards in here as well. We think ultimately the telecommunications gets repackaged outside of the land use code because of recent FCC rulings that dictate process for approval of those, and also because most of the 5G infrastructure ends up in public right away anyway. But those are future things to do. I noticed that your telecommunications have been recently sort of revisited. It looked pretty modern and good, so we didn't make much in the way of change. And then finally, the town has what they call residential protection standards right now, where certain uses can't be located within a certain number of feet of a residential lot line. And it's a kind of a good start to make sure that things that residents complain about don't get located next to an existing neighborhood, for example, like a gas station or truck stop or something like that. But when we looked through it and we were creating new uses that had similar impacts to the uses that are currently, in that set of uses subject to residential protection standards, we thought, wow, it's probably a good idea to increase the range of uses that are subject to these standards to make it fair across the board. So example, a gas station and a car wash may have relatively comparable traffic, exhaust, smells, noise, things like that. So whereas one of them may have been subject to it, the other one wasn't under your current code. Under this code, they would be sort of harmonized so that they would both be subject to it. So things that create residential impacts, we just made sure to sort of address them across the board for all the new uses that are in the table to make sure that you had a consistent policy as a town towards things that tend to be disruptive, in people's backyards and whatnot. Beyond that, I was making a joke earlier about how marijuana patient is a land use in your current code. There are standards in there for that. We don't think it's really land use issues, but we brought forward those policies as sort of supplemental standards in here as well. And that's why I say when you start getting towards the end of it, it's a little disorganized, but we'll just make sure staff knows how to find things in here. Staff has reviewed it in great detail, and we have collaborated to make sure that we had the best possible result. So just addressing those changes that Ali talked about, As we were going through, we noticed that there were outside inventories in some retail centers. Some big home improvement stores, for example, will rent out pickup trucks or flatbeds or sometimes other types of equipment that people use in home improvement projects or small commercial projects. They couldn't currently store that outside as it was, and so we addressed that. In doing that, we also realized we didn't have an opportunity for a downtown retailer to put inventory out on the sidewalk near the front door. We thought that was important in terms of small town character, which we're hearing through the comprehensive planning process is really important to be able to sort of do the sidewalk sale thing. So we put some guardrails around that as well. It came up actually today that there's an additional need to sort of reconcile in terms of the location of businesses that rent sort of bigger, heavier equipment than we had contemplated in the retail side. And one of our policy directives was to not unnecessarily create non-conforming uses. One of the things we heard very early on in our focus groups for the code is nobody could really pick out any site in town where they would go, that's bad and needs to go away, be amortized out or phased out over time, or shouldn't come back if it were to, be abandoned or hit by a tornado or whatever. And so there are some uses that represent that rent out, for example, heavy equipment that would qualify as a commercial vehicle, tracked equipment and things like that, but not necessarily huge, in town in the BLI zoning district. And so our thinking is currently we have the heavy motor vehicle sales and rental category would cover that, but it's pretty limited in terms of its geography. And we're thinking we should probably expand that into BLI on the same terms as heavy motor vehicle repair, which would be allowed in BLI. So the policy choice there is rental and sales have a bigger inventory. So it's a very blunt instrument and kind of a poor proxy for scale. The available lot area is really scale is where that comes in. But at the same time, we don't want to make these existing businesses non-conforming, and we do want to make sure that there are potential areas in the town where some of the existing businesses might be able to grow. So we think that in the abstract, that's not necessarily a bad concept as a point of policy, and we wouldn't oppose a change like that. I think when you get to public hearing, you'll probably hear some advocacy for that. We just want you to know from a planning perspective, from a legal perspective, from a policy perspective, we don't see any issues in terms of changing the land use table to match up the rental and sales with the repair and service. So that's our thoughts, and if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Do you have any questions? Comments? It's very long. Yeah.
This is why I roast coffee.
Oh, yeah. I was kind of surprised. There's one area, I'm not going to bring it up, but I was surprised at the definitions of some things that were on there on page 34 and 35. I did not have any idea that our land use codes would have those specificities in there.
It's probably First Amendment stuff, I'm guessing.
I think that has to be something like that, because I could not figure out how that went in there. But this is awesome. I've went through some of it, but it's so long and so hard to go through. It's a lot to try to absorb, and I can appreciate what you have done and what you're going through and what you're continuing to do, because this is no small task.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think one of the issues is, in terms of definition, it's not necessarily enough to define the use. If there are words or phrases within that definition that require further definition, in some cases, unfortunately, we have to go there.
Yeah.
And when the First Amendment is involved, you definitely have to go there because the constraints are serious. And those definitions get tested over time, and that gives us, more protection.
I just get a layman's term definition of, so obviously the C means conditional use, which we're familiar with. P stood for permitted, right?
Yes.
And the L, what really process, like in short little concise, what would the L process be?
It's kind of like the P process, except that when there's an L, that's a flag that you need to go down under the table and see what the standards are in that zoning district. Yeah, and there are some, and we should talk about this as we get into a full-blown code reform project. There are some municipalities that elevate L so that there's like a little bit of notice or comment or something like that. So there are different, and I don't think we did that here. No, this is just a permitted. Yeah.
Process them like a site plan.
Yeah. sometimes there are uses that are sensitive. Sometimes, like in Loveland, we built something in between. We called it a special use so that it was processed by staff, but there was notice and comment to the public. So sometimes you figure as you roll through the code reform process, experience shows that there's some uses that are more sensitive than you thought they'd be. And then we either create process or we elevate the process to accommodate that.
So it's kind of like some of it could be an administrative review with a little more looking, and so it could be more aggressive, just kind of depends. And you just have to read all those sections to kind of come up with how that applies.
Yeah, so when you get to an L in the table, you look in the lines past the table, you find the name of the use, and then it'll give you the standards in the zoning district that had the L. So it might be a few more trees in the yard, it might be the minimum lot size is a certain size, things like that, usually in order to keep scale or prevent some sort of functional or aesthetic incompatibility with the neighboring property.
So I guess to follow up on your question is, currently as drafted, this wouldn't require any additional special process other than an administrative review to make sure that those additional criteria are met. What Todd's saying is, as you go through the land use overhaul altogether, you can add as a board, if you'd like to see some of those limited uses elevated and require more public input, we can certainly add that. It's
That's
not
a place to
drafted that
really
way.
look.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, read those pieces, because this is stuff that could be sensitive that we maybe would want to be more, or man, this should be just permitted or what have you.
That's
Yeah,
why
so-
it's defaulted now is it's all administrative. If the board would like to see it some point later, it'd still be administrative, but we would have a public notice that goes out.
But in
to
the same sense, we can look at the definition or the stuff below and say, we think there should be more in that L description, and it would be easy to just amend those. The L stays in the chart stays the same, and the process is a little different.
The trick in doing all that is, you look at the stuff that's sort of common in the landscape that doesn't need anything more. And then you look at the stuff where you think, okay, would this be a conditional use? In some cases, it's currently a conditional use. In some cases, it's not currently defined. Is this something that people are going to be sensitive about? And if so, why? And what do we think the board would do to mitigate that and approve it anyway? And so that's where we bring in sort of limited use, and we say, we think that they're common enough, but they have commonly understood consequences. And here's how we deal with that. So that's where those standards start. Nothing's perfect in this life. The first thing through the door is going to be a limited use, and it's going to have some additional impact that nobody thought about in that particular location or whatever. Adopting new code is not without risk, but your current code is in such bad shape that we recommend taking that leap here tonight. And then, of course, conditional use still goes through the same process that it previously had. The hope is in the new code to identify enough of those factors that we can push things down to the staff level and then reduce the number of conditional uses across the board. The enduring legacy of the board in terms of quality development in the town is a code that says what the board wants to do. And then as board members change or whatever, the code still says what the board that adopted the code wants to do.
Anybody have any other questions or comments for Todd or Ally? Well, this is a public hearing. I think we have a guest here that would like to address the board. So, Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Rusty, would you please come up? And it's good to see you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll note for the record that you opened the public hearing at 7:53.
Oh, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Board, Rusty O'Neill, 310 Temple Parkway, Frederick. I've met with Todd and Ally this evening, and I had also reached out to Todd in the past few weeks and planning staff with some issues and concerns about where my business goes. Be blunt. The interesting part about it is we're doing good and we're looking at building a building. We want to stay in Frederick. It's a $1.2 million facility, which isn't a lot of money for some people, but it's scary as hell for me. But with that being said, hearing that the new land use code was coming out, I wanted to make sure I dissected it very, very carefully to understand where we fit in this new land use code. And like I'd mentioned, or like Todd had mentioned, there was some concerns. Right now, Interstate Rental and I are allowed in the BLI district. BLI, for those of you that have been in my business, we do dingoes and skid steers and trailers and dump trailers. Pretty much, the small items, 10,000 pounds and less. A lot of what we rent, the town's maintenance facility has, and as well as just going through quickly. I pulled up a map. You've got Easy Excavation, Baker Builders, New Energy Structures, Interstate Rental, of course, and so on and so forth. Other businesses that have very similar lots that we do, and they are in BLI now, and with the new land use code, they will be permitted as BLI. The concern is in the heavy motor vehicle sales or rental category. And the proposal before you tonight only has that category is only allowed in industrial. Ally and Mr. Messenger both feel that, when I spoke to them, were fairly confident that the use of limited use in BLI would be appropriate, would be consistent with what the town of Frederick has done in the past, and what neighboring or what other uses that are going to be allowed in this. That chart can be found on page 70 of the proposed ordinance. It's the second half of table 3-8. And there are two halves to that, and you don't want to get confused on the first half of that table. There is a heavy motor vehicle repairs and service. And in the repairs and service category, it is repairs and service is allowed in BLI, industrial, and CC. CC to me is a little in the gray area. If I was on the board, I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable allowing heavy equipment rental in CC, even though it has been historically. But I would propose, if the board's wish is to approve this ordinance this evening, I would ask you to add an amendment to it to add a limited use on heavy motor vehicle sales and rental under the BLI column. And that's all I have on that, but I spent a lot of time reading through this, and specifically on the rental. And as far as what on rental companies being limited, what that L means to me from reading through this is there's two main limitations that a rental company is going to have to do to get their business license. One is a 6-foot screening fence along any property lines that abut to residential properties. So we have to provide screening to residential properties. Secondly, I believe it's any outdoor repair has to have a 250-foot setback from any residential property. And so the limitations are to protect the residential neighbors if we're going in adjacent to residential properties. Just a little side note on, I specifically know what the limitations are on that category. But other than that, staff has done a great job. It is a tough read, but there's a lot of good stuff in this land use. They just missed one little box. And thank you for your time.
Rusty, thank you. Brian? Are we gonna be able, well, maybe I should ask Todd, I'm sorry, Todd, are we gonna be able to address the concerns of Mr. O'Neill and see if there's a way we can address what he's concerned about?
Yeah, I think, Mayor Pro Tem, that the table 3-8, if there's a motion to amend on the floor when this goes forward, the heavy motor vehicle sales or rental, you could tag the BLI zone with an L. And then if you look down on page 71, sorry, 72, sorry, 73, 73 and 72 actually. Heavy motor vehicle sales or rental in the I district is allowed if it's demonstrated the standards that apply to passenger motor vehicles and sales and rental are met. And for those, and I guess we might have read that differently, but I think for those, the demonstration is not more than one vehicle display pad, which may be elevated up to 3 feet at its highest point, is provided per 100 feet of road frontage. Probably not an issue for the business that we're talking about here. No other materials for sale will be displayed between the principal building and the right-of-way. Vehicles will be stored on paved parking surfaces. No bay door open directly towards residential, public open space, or public right-of-way unless there's an intervening building that blocks the view of the bay door. And if washing areas are provided, they're covered and have drains that are connected to the sanitary sewer system. Drains shall be constructed with oil water separator, and treatment facilities shall be approved by the town engineer. So those would be the standards that would apply in the case of a BLI district for this use. If there was that retail component, the 6-foot fence and all that would also apply. So if you're doing a heavy motor and a retail, you know, that might be the issue that we're talking about. So let's see, in terms of retail, just to confirm, going back up to the general commercial use table, which is some pages earlier. There you go, table 3-4 on page 55. Retail commercial is a limited use. Retail sales and services, mind you, limited use in BLI, so you would be able to do that in the BLI district. So inventory may be displayed outdoors, provided it's located within 15 feet of the principal entrance. Passenger motor vehicles and pickup trucks that are offered for rent may be stored in parking spaces. Other inventory must be either completely screened from view or, if 9 feet or less in height, enclosed with an opaque fence. So you could have your bigger equipment, and you could also have your little equipment at the same dealership under those parameters, which could be, and I think are currently being implemented at the shop that we're talking about.
Okay.
So I think it's a very minor change. It's just dropping an L in the BLI on the table that includes that use, and then a little further down for the specific use-specific standard, adding in the I district, adding in the BLI and I district. Very, very short change. I think it is protective of the community values, and it does what's happening now or better in terms of protection for community character purposes.
All right, thank you. Ally, can I get your opinion on these changes? You have anything you'd like to input on what Mr. O'Neill brought up?
Question? May not be got. So just having the small stuff that he does, he would fit into the heavy motor vehicle sales and rental. That would be what his business would be categorized as? Or would he be in the passenger motor vehicle sales and rental?
So because of the tracks on some of the equipment,
Okay.
mostly it would be called commercial vehicles. The trailers and so forth would be defined as commercial vehicles, which would bring it into heavy.
Heavy, okay. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So, 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 so,
But also there's a retail sales component too, retail rental component for smaller items that don't classify as commercial vehicles. So you kind of got two uses going on, but they're both allowable. And the standards that apply are compatible for them.
Just making sure I'm understanding, because I got a little mixed up there.
Thanks, Chad.
Oh, yeah.
Mayor Pro,
Devil's in the details.
Mayor Pro Tem, I think that Mr. O'Neill has, we do have a lot of contractors that are currently in BLI zone districts with very similar equipment. And so it's not uncommon around town, and we were trying not to create non-conforming uses. So staff has no issue with that suggested change.
What I needed to know. Thank you, Ally. Okay. Are there any other comments or anything for the public hearing?
Do you want to double check to make sure there's no other public that wanted to speak?
Oh, that's what I meant. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, then I would like to close the public hearing. Do I have to take a vote on that?
No, you can close the public hearing.
And we'll close the public hearing on this. Good. All right, moving along to our G. Item G, Resolution 23R17, establishing a Frederick Youth Commission.
Do we want to take action on this tonight?
Vote.
Vote on F.
Vote on the ordinance?
Oh, shit, yes. Yeah, we do. Sorry, my apologies.
Can I just ask that you tell us what that amendment or that addition was again? So
Yeah,
we can
because
get that right.
I have no clue.
Talking about, I think if you'd like to have an amendment to the ordinance as presented to include that limited use as discussed in the public
We can just
hearing.
say that.
I think that's
will be-
clear enough.
That one.
Maybe it'd be helpful for Megan's purposes. Table 3-8, heavy motor vehicle sales or rental in the BLI zone, a change from prohibited to limited use. And then on page
We'll make sure that's clear in the meeting minutes that that's what was being discussed, rather than having you regurgitate it all.
Yeah.
So based on Mr. Messenger's comments, perhaps the motion could be to approve ordinance 1386 with the inclusion of the amendment to table 3-8 and other sections as described in the discussion.
Yeah, on page 73, Romanet XI, add BLI or in front of the letter I.
Yes.
Whoa.
That's it.
Which one are you gonna read all that? Okay. That got it?
I got it.
Okay, we need someone to read this in for a vote.
Go for it, Chad.
Chad, I think you'd be great on this.
So Tim, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1386 as we discussed.
Including the amendment.
Second.
I do it? Okay.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Lamach,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March,
Yes.
Trustee Taveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay.
Thank you for the hard work. It's not easy to do that stuff.
Thanks, Todd. That's super. Ally, thank you. All right, now we can move on to item G, Resolution 23R17 for the establishment of a Frederick Youth Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So in your packet is a proposed resolution to create a youth commission for the town of Frederick. As some background, the Youth Commission was actually disbanded in June of 2017 with a rewrite of the boards and commissions section of the Frederick Municipal Code. Since that time, this board has gotten together, specifically trustees Padilla and Brown, to look at our boards and commissions, to work with our town attorney as well as with my office to make sure that our boards and commissions are serving the specific purposes that they should be, make sure the recruitment is being handled properly, and to also evaluate whether there were needs in the community that needed to be addressed. The group, trustees Padilla, Brown, myself, and Town Attorney Myers have been working on the Frederick Youth Commission framework for about 6 months, finding that the youth was something that we needed to address, that we needed to make sure that voice was captured in our community and make sure we were creating opportunities for youth in the town of Frederick. As such, we have provided a resolution, and Town Attorney Myers has actually provided an amended resolution with additional comments from trustees Padilla and Brown. Those were not included in your packet, so for the public that is watching, I will outline some of those items and then invite discussion to see if the board has any changes or what their direction is for staff, since this is some last-minute changes. So under the purpose, there's a proposal to change family-friendly to include either inclusive or vibrant. Under membership, we are adding an additional non-voting member, which would be a town staff member appointed by the town manager, who shall act as a youth commission liaison and be responsible for ensuring youth commission activities are in accordance with town policies and procedures, commission bylaws, and other applicable laws and rules and regulations. There is an additional section for the responsibilities of the membership, which would be to attend the majority of meetings, to communicate when they're absent, to maintain good academic standing, contribute to a positive culture and environment on the commission, engage in a positive manner in each meeting, and complete an annual survey and feedback that'll be provided to the Board of Trustees. Then there's some additional discussion on if a commission member should be removed for absences or other reasons, and that the final decisions shall be made with the consent of the town manager. There's a new section outlining the responsibilities of the youth commission liaison or staff member that would create and deliver a standard orientation and onboarding to include roles, responsibilities, resources, introduction to town leaders, and other information. The educator who's part of the commission will review and provide feedback on the orientation and onboarding. Ensure youth commission activities are tailored in an age-appropriate manner. Develop and administer an annual anonymous survey and feedback, and results and recommended actions provided to the board. Working with the non-voting members of the commission and the Board of Trustees to create a positive, respectful learning environment and culture where the commissioners' voices are respected and heard, and arranging for background checks as necessary for any town staff or non-voting member who would be interacting with the youth commission as a group or individually. In addition, there was some questions about the executive committee, and the executive committee was created at the recommendation of Trustee Brown to provide leadership within that core group, since there are 20 members. And so just some questions on, are they elected officers? Should we call them the executive committee? And then we walk through each one of them. So a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, a deputy secretary, a public relations individual, and a membership liaison. And then also the actions of the commission, we added in there, making sure that the youth commission liaison and non-voting members work with the commission to create the bylaws. So I'm open to any discussion, any suggestions, recommendations from the board on the creation of this. It is the hope of trustees Brown and Padilla that we complete this before the end of the year for recruitment, but I would also invite trustees Padilla and Brown to offer their comments, since they did the legwork behind the creation of this. I'm just the mouthpiece.
Thank you, Megan, for all the work on this. And yeah, I think it's my hope and Trustee Brown's that we can take action on this tonight to kind of keep this moving along. The only other thing I would add to the changes would be something Trustee Lamach brought up, which is just to clarify that a commission member would be off the commission upon graduation or in the term year that they turn 18, so that if somebody turned 19 but they were still a senior in high school, that they wouldn't just be kicked off. So just making sure we clarify that. But I think you did a good job of kind of going through the suggested changes, and thank you for humoring me. I think with youth, we just need more structure. And so I appreciate it. And I don't know if Trustee Brown has anything to add to that.
I just want to say that I am super excited about this. It's something that I've been passionate about. I'm glad to see that it's getting close to crossing that finish line so that we can move forward. I have a lot of thanks to Trustee Padilla for kind of spearheading the last couple of weeks with some of my being absent and not in the best of health, and kind of steering this, and has found some great improvements that we've caught along the way. So thank you so much, Trustee Padilla, for your extra work on that. And I'm just excited to get the youth population of our town back involved with the town, and with all of these exciting things. I think again, getting them to be the future of our town and getting them involved now is a crucial, important part of what we do here. So thank you to everyone for all the hard work, to Megan and to Jason for their diligence in getting this put together. I'm very excited about this.
If I could clarify the additional changes since we saw the draft, and the added language would be that the commission member would, in that year they turn 18 or graduates from high school, which is later, so that would track with whichever one. And then in this section in regards to the executive committee, I've just removed the idea of committee and put in executive officers, and defining that there would be 6 executive officers that will continue to do all the things that is described, so it's a little bit more clear. So if there aren't any other additional changes, I have all of those red lines in here, and we can put that in the formalized final version of this if it's approved this evening.
Great. So we have enough to where we can move forward and take a vote on this, approve it, and get it going.
Right, if the board is comfortable with the changes, I think Megan did a great job of outlining exactly what all of those were, so that the public and the board is aware of what those changes would be in the final form. And if you're comfortable moving forward this evening, we can finalize that and make sure it's ready for signature.
Okay. Anybody have any other comments or questions or anything? Just one, I'd like to make a comment before we take a vote. Trustee Padilla and Brown, thank you. And Jason, Megan, everyone involved in this thing, this is great. Having sat on the board since 2018, I didn't know whether this was ever going to come around again. It's so great. And to address what Trustee Lamont brought up, I am one of those people that graduated when they were 19 years of age. So, well done. Okay, if there's nothing else, we need some direction, please.
Mayor Pro Tem March, I move to approve Resolution 23-R-17, establishing the Frederick Youth Commission, incorporating the changes discussed tonight.
Second.
I'm writing furiously. Trustee Taveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Lamont,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along here, we have an executive session. Do we do mayor and trustee reports first? Okay. Trustees? Do you have anything? Anyone?
I wanted to just hopefully pass along my appreciation of going through the planning commission's review and comments of the land use code stuff, how much I appreciate that they spent considerable time reviewing that in detail, and all their comments seem very thought out, and surely appreciate the time they committed to that. and wanted to thank them. Even though they're not here, I'm sure somebody can pass that along for us, hopefully. That's all I have.
Anything from anyone else? Okay. I have nothing, so, how about we take about a 5-minute break here, and then we will go into executive session.
So Mayor Pro Tem, we'd need a motion to do that first.
Sorry, okay.
Raise.
A motion to take a 5-minute break?
Well, to go into the executive session, you can
Oh, we do that before?
do that, and then you can take a recess before we start it if you'd
Oh,
like.
Pleasure of the chair. If you wish to take a recess and then do the motion for executive session after, you can
I
do
think we
that.
should recess 2 minutes, then do the thing, then
then 2 more minutes, then do.
On the dot.
Okay, you guys wanna, okay,
Mayor Pro
Read
Tem
it.
March, I move that we go into executive.
I'll second.
okay.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem March,
Yes.
Trustee Taveldi,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Lamach.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, 5-minute break.